This is the Crappie Connection, brought to you by Redneck Rubber, Power Crappie, Visit Ridgeland, B&M Poles, K9 Fishing, Cornfield Fishing Gear, Bobby Garland Baits, Genco Fishing, Denali Rods, The Direction TV, Top Hat Jigs, Crappie Magnet, Anderson Minnow Farm,
Hook and Bullet Purpose-Built Optics.
About a mile from the big muddy river, place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away from being out in the sun all day. No matter where in the world I go, I'll always find home on the banks of that oxbow.
What's up, guys? Brad Chappell back here at the Mid-South Hunting and Fishing Show in Grove, Oklahoma. Got my bud at the end.
Todd Huckabee.
Also got two other guys. I'm going to let them do a little introduction.
Barry Morrow. I fish on Truman Lake, and I also guide there, and I do a lot of tournament fishing.
Next guy. Come on, W.
You forget
Robert Robinson.
That one's short. One of the subjects that we're going to really key in today is, you know, both of you guys are known for catching big fish, and everybody wants to go catch big fish in their home waters. What are some of the ways that you decipher a lake to find those big fish? And I know, Barry, one of mine comes to mind is Lake Washington, and during the tournament that was a really tough one. But kind of help us go through that process on how you locating these big fish.
Well, Lake Washington was a unique lake for me to fish. There was really two main sections of it. There's one goes east and west, I believe, one north and south. It's like a big horseshoe bend there, and really it's all got good fish, good water. But for me, I like to focus on what I do best, and that's fishing the shallower end of the lake, anywhere from 12 foot into 3 foot of water, something like that. Now, granted, you could get up into the cypress trees and find big fish in there if your boat would get in there. Obviously, running a 21-foot Ranger, I couldn't do that. So mainly what I do is I scan the lake, zigzagging across the lake, not just up and down it. I zigzag back and forth. I'm really looking for what everybody tries to find, and that is the ditches and the little drop-off ledges that you can find in a lake. And every lake will have that no matter what end of the arm you're fishing. But someplace where those fish can get out of whether it's current or being pressured. And what I learned is that different lakes, the fish act different. They may be on the very bottom, hugging the bottom when there's a lot of pressure, or the fish are at the very top. And that's probably what most people overlook on Lake Washington. It was that all the fish that we caught that were big probably were about 3 foot under the water surface. And I think a lot of people fish underneath them, and you're definitely not going to catch a crappie if you're underneath the thing. But that's what we did on that lake. And every lake's different for me. When I try to go to a brand new lake that I've never fished before, I try to find what I like to fish, and that's stained water. I like muddy, stained water. And most people think muddy is not a good thing, but when you're looking for big fish, you got to go where the food source is. And definitely shallower water, muddy water, you're going to find the bigger fish. They just grow faster in that end of the lake. And as Robert probably knows, and all of us that fish here, you know, deep water, clear lakes, they all have big fish, but they don't have the numbers, and they're harder to catch in deeper water. But if you can kind of narrow in your target, which is what I'm going after during a tournament, I don't have it 2 or 3 days to locate them. I've got to start where I know I have the best shot, and I kind of eliminate it and start there.
That was quick. That's good. Robert, what's some ways that you go in there and, you know, try to find some big fish in the lake?
So one that comes to mind is Texoma. You know, should have been our tournament, mine and Cody's, but you know, we didn't keep a 8th fish. We had a fish die, but we did pull from a 10th to a 2nd place. So the first 3 days we spent like everybody else, scanning the coves. Never been on Texoma. First time I'd ever seen it. We ran 24, 26 miles one way every day. And we got up in there on the brush piles and stuff like everybody else. And the last day before we got to the ramp, I told Cody, I said, you know what? I have been, even Truman, Eufaula. Brian Young asked me one time about Eufaula if it fished like. So at Wister and Kerr, I like to fish the channels. Fish the stumps along the channel. Of course, the channel, is kind of like valleys. The contour of the land goes up and down. So, part of the channel the stumps may be an 8 foot, and you may go 300 yards and it kind of dips down in the valley, and the stumps are in 20 foot. So the last day on Texoma, I looked on my Lowrance unit and I seen this river channel going through the lake, on the upper end. And we went to scanning, 100 foot off both sides of the boat. The stump, it was unbelievable. And what I learned that day, I shot a video. Wally said I couldn't share anything, because of all the people fishing it. And, I shot a video and I actually put it on Facebook after the fact. If these fish are still here, we've got it. So what I found about those fish is kind of like Barry said down in the ditches. I could tell they weren't pressured, because if you found 5 fish on a stump, we were going to catch all 5 of them. I mean, there was none of this, what we're running into, spooky fish, following the bait, what have you. We didn't have that. So I could tell that they hadn't been bothered. When I asked Jerry Hancock and some of those, have they ever, Cale Ward, he guides there. Hey, have you really? And he said, no, I really haven't concentrated on the stumps along the channel. And I said, you need to. I mean, I could guide on Texoma, and I've only fished it for like 5 days. I mean, it was unbelievable at the numbers of fish that was out along that channel. And same way with Wister, same way with Kerr, where I guide.
Do you typically find big fish with little fish?
I tried to in a nice way of different people. I don't fish many brush piles. I used to, and Barry can probably. So sometimes you can come to a brush pile that may be loaded with some big fish, but more times than not, it's got smaller fish, but you'll find 1 or 2 big fish maybe around the edges or something. But I can get out in that open water, so what I want to do is fish where the largest number of big fish are, okay, where I have a better chance. And what I found in some of these is along the channel. Now, during the summertime, all the boat ramps are full at Wister. They see my truck and trailer and they're like, dude, I didn't see you all day. So Wister has sloughs all over, and it's 2 to 4 foot of water. It is amazing. I take some of my clients, especially the ones out of town, the big fish are they're just sitting everywhere, just waiting for us to drop on them. No pressure. I mean, the fish will, even in dirty water. That's one thing me and Todd talked about. And Barry probably, how well these fish react or see this bait in dirty water. We always use bright colors, because we wanted to see it. But shoot, I can drop a monkey milk in the dirtiest, and I've been amazed at how far they can see that bait. But yeah, for me, away from the big, I'm not saying you can't win a tournament on brush piles, but what I tell my clients is, do you want to go to work at a daycare that's got like 75 screaming kids in it? You've seen dogs with puppies and they'll bite their ears, and then they growl at them. I think the big fish are basically the same way, maybe, because have you ever seen these fish? I remember first getting live scope, and some of these crappie you'd drop down and they'd look at it. I've had them swim around it and they'd look at it again. And they may swim around the other way and then they'd eat it, and it'd be a small fish. But that's just my take on it. I want to try. I mean, I'm always learning. I mean, I just learned some stuff from him, about, of course, I look for the ditches and stuff. Wister's got them, Kerr's got them too, off the main channel.
Pretty much everywhere's got them.
Yeah, everywhere's got them. But you have to, when you fish open water as much as I have over the years, wind is a big factor. It's hard to stay on them. But yeah, mainly open water.
Barry, how many Missouri State Championships did you win?
We've won 3 major championships or state championships. Chad Moppin is my partner. We won 3. We tied 1 and lost on total weight, and then we lost the 5th one by half a 1/100th of an ounce, and that's fishing 3 different lakes.
So, as far as that's Lake of the Ozarks, Truman, and Mark Twain.
Right.
So those 3 lakes, what do you do different than most of the competition to find those bigger fish?
Our success on Lake Ozarks basically just took me to an area that I grew up fishing when I was a youngster, and nothing's ever changed for me. I fish shallow water, and I go to the back of the bays, and I get into 4 to 6 foot of water and work my way out most of the time. I say 4, that could be 2 or 3 when you certain times. But I go back and fish the areas that most people don't go to. And the last 2 or 3 years, we had troubles because we had boats following us, obviously. And they weren't there the year before, but they saw us midday go back into an area that we had pre-fished and knew was there. And lots of the area we were fishing has got stumps and logs, and it just floated into the back. It's a great big bay. When the wind's blowing, all that stuff filters back in the back. And we're fishing underwater stuff that nobody sees, and most people are out there fishing 8, 10, 12, 14 foot in the deep channels, along the bluffs, fishing brush piles. We weren't doing that. We were singling out those fish that were big and able to catch them in those areas. That's Lake Ozarks, Mark Twain. It's the same thing, just fishing where a lot of people don't. I don't care to fish around a whole bunch of boats, just because I think, 1, it messes up the fish, 2, they'll be right on top of you, and I just like to do my thing.
I've seen you have some water rage when I've been in the boat with you.
I can't imagine that.
I hate to say that, but the thing I love about tournament fishing personally is you do your own thing. You learn the water yourself. I don't like to dig out information from other people. I really don't, and they talk without me saying anything sometimes. I had a guy recently tell me exactly how many pounds he caught the day before pre-fishing, and then he was in this area. And I said, well, I'll see you tomorrow, I guess, because I hadn't been there all week, but I fished a tournament the week before, so I knew fish was in an area. And again, that water was a big flat, just a big open flat, and every once in a while there'd be some structure or a little dip in the surface, the bottom of the lake that was holding fish. And going back to answering the big, talking about those big fish, do they group together, stay together, or are they in brush piles? If I fish a big brush pile, normally the first drop down, I'll catch a big fish. But when it's big, I'm talking 1.25 pounds. The big fish that are 1.5 pounds and bigger, going up to 2 more, I've seen maybe 3 of them stacked, maybe 1, 2, 3 right on top, but they'll be near a log or tree or stump, and that's the only fish that are there. And what my belief is that those big fish are big because of a reason. They stay isolated, and you got to find them, and they don't hang out with everything else. I think they're alert. They know that, trouble's coming if there is. And I know that you drop any jig in the water, it doesn't matter. The shallower water, the more the fish react, because they feel that pressure of that bait moving that water. And so that's how I think those fish are alerted so quickly in shallower water.
I know we talked about, ditches and things, and Grenada Lake comes to my mind that the best success I've had at Grenada, especially in the springtime, is off of ditches. And when you hear the terminology ditches, you might think a big difference. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times, especially a core lake that gets drawn down a lot and silted in over the years, a ditch in that lake could only be 6 inches difference between the flat. Mm-hmm. And that's actually their ditches in that reservoir. And so those kind of little details, you might say, well, this is 6 foot, but that 6.5 foot, that might be the key depth in that ditch. Mm-hmm. And that's not really a ditch, I wouldn't think, but that's a ditch for those fish in those lakes.
Exactly, yeah. I know in Grenada, we finished third one year up there at Grenada, and it was a great tournament for us. We We went in there. The lake was, I think, 722 or something like that. It was 16 feet high probably. They had a lot of rain, and of course there was a ton of water to fish. And through guiding and the fishing I have done, I just know that when the water rises, immediately when it rises, those fish are going to hold in the same depth you caught them the day before for a day or two. But that water might have been 6 foot before the rain, but now it's 12 foot. But those fish are going to sit there for a few days until, I'm talking springtime now, when you're thinking about spawning. Those fish will eventually move up into the bushes and that kind of thing. Even without a rise or fall in water, if you've located fish that are starting to move up to the bank, they may be as shallow as a foot or less. But the bigger ones, that's usually the males that are moving up there. The bigger ones are going to be holding in 7 or 8 foot of water still. So when we did really well in that tournament, that lake had come up and a lot of fish had moved up into the trees and the bushes, and everybody was up in there. We were fishing probably 6-8 foot away from the bushes and catching the bigger females that were still staging and holding out there, not ready to move up into the trees and the bushes like everybody was thinking. And that was the success we had, the key that we had to catching those fish. And that was a great year for us because we finished, I guess, with a championship on the points for Crappie Masters. We also had some boats the second day that didn't even fish that area, was following us the second day. And I mean, they were close enough that we had conversation. And that's the kind of stuff you run into once in a while. So stick to your game plan. We fished the same thing. We just slowed down a little bit. And but they stayed with us all day long. But we ended up finishing second there, doing what I just said, fishing out a little bit deeper than what most people would
spider
think.
rigging?
We were spider rigging, yep. Grenada Lake and Lake Washington, we had the spider rig. I'm a one polar, and believe me, the good thing about fishing tournaments, if you really get into it, it forced me to learn how to spider rig. I'm a one polar, always have been. But to compete against those guys, that especially Southern States, Mississippi, and all of them, they spider rig forever, and we had to learn to do that. So we did, and we competed. Today's world, it's flip-flop. Now we're all one poling, and all those spider riggers are having to learn to use live scope into one pole, and it's kind of makes you smile that it's kind of turned. But
it is.
There's nothing.
I'm not smiling over it. I'm kidding.
Well, for me, holding the pole, whether you long line, it's catching fish is exciting.
Yeah.
But when you're holding that rod in your hand, and that fish hits that, I mean, I hold my pole light enough. I've actually lost my pole out of my hand a few times. They hit so hard on those jigs that it's just incredible. Never quit fishing.
Yeah, absolutely. What about do you try to set? Do you have a particular bait that you would consider a big fish bait?
Well, I think my primary bait to go to is a June bug. I call it Truman Tornado bait. It's a beaver bottom bait. I've used some Bobby Garland baits. I do use Bobby Garland baits occasionally, especially if I'm tipping it with a minnow. The minnow minder is one of my favorites on that. But the key to me is how those fish are reacting to the size of bait that you drop down there. I got great sponsors, and they've told me you use what you need to win the tournament. But the key thing is when I drop that bait down there, how do those fish react to it? Do they turn? Live scope has taught me so much about how these fish react to baits, and your presentation of that bait is critical. Anybody can catch fish, I think, I really do. But with what Live Scope has taught me, that there are things I used to do that is not a good thing to do. I don't know how we caught fish all these years.
Especially during the wintertime.
Absolutely.
But now I'm seeing how they, less is more. I've lived that philosophy a long time. But if I don't move my bait hardly at all, I got a better chance of catching that fish with Live Scope, seeing it, than if I go down there and I pop my bait or I jerked it a little bit. I'll spook them doing that anymore. But it's crazy how the fish react. But my number one go-to bait, I'm telling you, is probably the June bug, Truman Tornado color. The guys who, Steve Holson, they built that jig for me, that color, and it's proven to be a great bait on any lake you go to.
I like that color too. Mm-hmm. You think of that June bug chartreuse as a bass bait, but I did real well at Darbon a couple of years on that color.
You know, I'm a firm believer that anything that replicates the color of an insect, and that June bug color is, you stick with a natural bait that imitates an insect that they would eat on, and you've got a good color.
For sure.
What about you, Robert?
What about me?
What's your baits?
So I'm with you. You know, the Holsons, they're an awesome family. Of course, you know, they're, you know, I guess whenever you drop your design, you know, they went with it. You know, it's a personal preference for me. You know, I'm probably the only pro staff that just use a beaver bottom other than a hair jig. And now I'm so thankful for this new design.
Oh, the small one, yep.
We got to introduce it here.
What's the name of it?
Beaver bottom?
Is it the small?
Well, see,
Just
Still
yeah,
the
it's
same.
just a different size. Yeah,
Just
yeah.
a different size.
People asked me if we were going to call it the baby bottom, but I said no, it's going to be the beaver bottom.
Baby beaver.
And the Truman Tornado, you know, is a good color. I was fortunate enough. I remember the phone call from Todd. What in the world do you want with a puke yellow looking bait with a white tail? You know, so we come out with a Worcester Wildcat. It's school bus yellow and white, which is a really good bait. But I'm like Barry, you know, now we have the live scope that allows us to see, and like he said, you know, we wanted to twitch this bait and all, and shoot, you'll scare them plumb off. But so as far as the baits go, you know, I'd go with a full-fledged beaver bottom. You know, of course, I started cutting the tails 2 or 3 years ago, you know, V-ing the tails and what have you. And if the fish didn't want it, I'd go to a hair jig. So for the last 3 to 4 months, I've had the prototype little baits, and when they weren't interested in the big profile, I would drop the little bait on them. But what shocked me was after the little bait, I would go ahead and drop a hair jig, and I thought maybe 50% of the fish that didn't want to bite the other would bite the hair jig, and it was actually less than 10%. You know, so it kind of, you know, from my experience, you know, somebody else may have a different experience, but that, you know, it did maybe kind of hinder me on the size of bait.
So what you're saying is it's size, not material.
Exactly. I mean, I think so personally. Now, I'm sure Barry and all of us have, you know, they won't eat this, so we go to what size, Barry? The little hair jig. I mean, I don't know. Some of these guys go down to
some of them are 32nd, 64th,
yeah, something like that.
124th.
You know, and I'm sure you can get them to go. But one thing that LiveScope has taught me during the wintertime, you know, people want to go smaller because they wouldn't eat our bait. When in all reality, these fish were so lethargic that it takes them forever to turn up to it a lot of times to eat it. And of course, you know, I say that I should have learned by cleaning the fish, because when you clean them during the wintertime, they got shad in them that long. And here I am going smaller. So one of my theories is just watching them, if they're going to waste the energy to eat anything, I've tried to go smaller, and then I went bigger, like me and Todd has discussed before. And couldn't catch them on a smaller bait, and a bigger bait, you know, they'd eat it up, I guess, if they're going to waste the energy. What's your take on that, Barry?
I want to just interject something here. I think we make this all too complicated.
Mm-hmm.
I'm aggressive when it's warm and the sun's out and the weather's great. I like to get out and do things. I'm more active, but when the temperature changes and it's cold, I'm a lot less active. So when I relate that to fishing, the whole key is figuring out what kind of mood they're in and what they want to do. I know Todd probably remembers when we first started with a Lindy exchange jig. Todd was up there flipping, I think, a 16th ounce jig. No, it was probably a eighth ounce or something like that, and I was flipping a 1/4 ounce jig, and that was the exchange. You could swip the head out real quick. But I was catching 3 or 4 fish, and he was still catching his first one. And he said, "What size jig you got on?" I think this YouTube, it was on YouTube, and it was probably the #1 viewed show that we did. But as soon as he snapped that jig off and put on a heavier jig, and the whole thing is those fish were reacting.
Yeah.
It's an aggressive bite, and they wanted to see that bait falling fast. Then there's times that those fish don't want the bait moving at all. So the whole key to catching fish is there is a puzzle you're putting together here, and you got to figure out not just what they want, but how they want it presented. And I think when you slow down and put all that kind of together, just don't go out each day thinking you're going to do the same thing you've been doing, because it'll change from one day to the next.
That right there is a tip that everybody
Oh, I guarantee you.
that you can learn from is doing those little things, and we talk about it in just about every show, I think. But and there's a reason why we talk about it so much, because those details, from changing a jig head size to a profile to the speed that you're retrieving it, or whatever you're doing for as crappie fishing, makes all the difference in the world.
Right. Barry, one of the things. So one of the big talks out there is the fish following your bait and not eating it. So a lot of my clients, and I show them when I clean the fish. So do you think? So I come to your house and you just got through eating a 6-course meal, and I mean you're just done, and I knock on it and I've got 2 pizzas with me. Do you want a couple of slices? I mean, do you think those fish, some of them that follow it, do you think there's a number of them that, I mean, they're full? I mean, you know, I mean, that's my theory or my take on it. I think some of them are that way.
I think if these fish are following your bait up, and if you continue to try to catch that fish, you're wasting time.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fish, number one, they're interested in it. They looked at it. And if they followed all the way up and you've done everything in the world to try to catch him, and I move to another fish. I just don't waste time on that fish anymore. My point that I say that I learned from some of these fish that get pressured and have been caught before, you drop that bait down there and they don't move. And I think all of us started out by making sure the bait was above the fish. And you get it within 6 inches and you hold it, and he probably will eventually come up and hit it. But I'm middle school for some reason. I can't wait that long. So I'll drop the jig right down on his nose. And if he doesn't move, I even will bump him with that jig. And as soon as I can get that fish to react a little bit, I can see him just starting to quiver a little, move, then that bait comes up. That's how I run it. And if I can get that fish to move, more than likely that fish is going to bite. But I have had this happen. That fish will start going down in the water column. He'll back away from that bait. And as he keeps backing away and you think, dang, I lost him, I don't give up. I go right down with, I'll follow that bait, that fish all the way down 2 or 3 foot. And before it gets straight to the bottom, he'll just knock the fire out of it. So that's a point I will say to you. If you're using live scope, you make sure you watch it and stay focused and fish hungry. And that fish starts backing away and dropping down, you just take that bait right to him and he'll eat it.
What's some of the mistakes you see people fishing, and both you guys fish a lot of people, and I know we've got to hit on one of them somewhat, but what's some of the common mistakes you see people do whenever they're going out fishing right now?
With live scope, dropping below the fish and trying to come up will spook them almost every time, for me, from what I see. Or hitting them. I mean, when you drop down, he said to bump them after, that's fine, but just drop your bait down on him, and I mean, just whack him with it, and I mean, they're gone. I mean, that's one of the things that I see a lot that these guys are doing. But a lot of people leave the fish that never react. But for me, I want the fish to react before I leave him. And our state biologists in Oklahoma, they say they don't sleep. I don't know the answer, but I know you can leave it there and maybe get close to him, and then you'll kind of see that fish quiver. And like Barry said, he's going to eat it. So a lot of my clients will leave them big fish and probably never recognize the bait or what have you.
Biggest mistake I run across, and it's not a mistake, I don't blame them for doing it, they're not used to watching TV and catching fish. They want to watch their line. They want to watch their pole. And that's, I'm not a pole watcher per se unless I was spider rigging, but It's all in feeling it, but they want to see what's going on, and just turning their head away and not depending on the feel is probably the thing. And it's not a fault. It's just experience. You know, we take it for granted. We do it every day. We know exactly what it feels like and exactly how to do it. And I can even pitch it where not even look where I'm pitching. I just know by looking at the screen and where the fish is, and I can put the jig right where I want it. But it's to get them to do that, it's a whole different ball game, and to expect them to do it is really asking too much.
It is.
Todd, I know you see some common mistakes.
Oh, good grief.
Didn't have that much time.
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking big fish, the most common mistake that I see is just people being under-equipped. You know, they're using a good hook, a good thick gauge wire hook with too light of a action rod that can't bury that hook
That's
in.
right.
Or they're using a really stiff rod with a light wire hook, then they're going to bend the hook out. He saw it a couple of weeks ago. We're not going to name any names, but it was really close. And so I'll see that sometimes. People are like, well, man, I want to use this jig head. I'm like, okay, but just remember, we've got 15-pound braid on here, and these rods are stiff. That jig hook will bend out if you set the hook the way that you're used to with your limber rod. And so I think that's the biggest mistake I see with people that are targeting trophy fish is that they're under-equipped. I mean, I can't remember who we did a podcast here just a couple of weeks ago, and the guy was talking about, you know, going elk hunting with a 22 or going squirrel hunting with a 30-30. I mean, you've got to use the right equipment for what you're targeting.
That's
your intention
That's
is.
a good example right there, for sure.
Yep, but that's it.
Well, you know, go back to these details. What about, I want to ask this real quick, and full moon. I get a lot of people that don't want to come fishing on the full moon or actually want to fish on the full moon. What have you seen in the past in both of you guys' experience on full moon phases? Let's just say the springtime.
So, obviously, there's something with the moon.
Right.
Because anything that can make the tides come in and out, there's something in it. Me personally, I don't know. I always look at, you know, maybe how active or not active they are, but I eat whether it's a full moon, don't you, Barry? I mean,
I live and die with that full moon and new moon. I just think
right.
3-4 days before and 3 or 4 days after, if you're not on the water, you're losing out. They're going to eat, and then all the time, just like we do. As far as the spawn action takes place, it's basically all in the amount of daylight, I think, hours that you have and letting that water warm up. When that water warms up to meets their needs, they're going to do their thing, and that can be anywhere from 57 degrees, 56 degrees to 65 degrees. It just depends on the area and the color of the water, and there's a lot of factors. But yeah, I do. I've got clients, they book religiously 3 or 4 days before and after on both of those moon phases.
Oh, yeah. I guarantee you the first days that go for me are March, April, full moon.
Yep, exactly.
And on Eufaula, it makes a big difference. Now, in the summertime, I don't want to fish a full moon.
Yep.
And the reason why is because them jokers ate all night long, and they ain't going to eat again until about noon. And you take August at Eufaula by noon, it's already 197 degrees and dew point 82. And
You mean I don't have to get up at 6 o'clock on Eufaula and be out there early? Damn.
That's something that changed with live scope. I was a daylight till dark guy, but I've learned these fish, they seem like they're feeding all night long. And, to get them to settle down and wait a couple hours after daylight.
Well, they get where they're going. The sun gets up and they're
Right.
like, okay, we need to.
Yeah, we need to get back home. All right, we've done our job. We're going to get back home.
They got to work.
Yeah, they've been out all night roaming the streets, and now they got to go home. And,
Right.
and that's when they'll get locked down on stuff.
I know a point that Barry made a while ago about, where live scope, where he put the rod, where he put the bait. I'll tell you what, any viewer that's out there, if they will go live scoping at night to where you have to learn foot position, trolling motor position without seeing it, and put your bait there still, I can tell you they will hone in their lives. I've done it 8 or 10 times, and I have to turn the headlight. I used to have to turn the headlight on a little bit, you know, to try to. But I've learned where my foot position is where my trolling motor position is, and never look up, you know, from the screen. But that's a whole different ball game right there, live scoping after dark. For sure.
I would say we'd film it, but that'd be kind of hard, wouldn't it?
No, not really. Infrared, you know.
Or infrared.
This is the infrared.
Do some thermal
deal.
stuff.
Back to the full moon, though, real quick, is I guess it's the same way, because I'm a deer hunter, Barry, you know. I mean, a full moon, kind of like Todd said, you know, they're up on their feet. They feed all night, and there's not much movement, you know, the next day. But I don't know. That's you could ask 10 different people and probably get 10 different answers.
All I know is I don't know nothing. I just got to keep learning every day I go. And that's why I go every day.
I learn something
That's
all
right.
the time
That's
from
right.
you guys.
That's right. You'll never. And you know one thing, and we can probably all agree on this on live scope, Barry. I mean, as long as you've been doing this and in the wins that you've had, I mean, you've actually admitted the mistakes you've made by seeing it on live scope and how these fish react.
The mistake I make is that I think I'm as young as I used to be. The only thing I'm proud of is that the tournaments we won old school fishing.
That's right.
And I'll take that with me to my grave.
I'll tell you what.
This live scope's keeping me out there because I'm determined I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to place in a tournament. I've placed, but I haven't won yet, and that's still to come.
Oh, you will.
Absolutely.
All right.
Appreciate you guys as always. Subscribe, comment. Hey, you got anything, Todd?
No, I think we covered it all.
Until next time, Brad Chappell here.
Todd Huckabee.
Barry.
They don't know who they are.
Barry Morrow.
WSD out.
Keep your lines tight and set the hook. That's all I got.
There you go.
Okay. Holla.
See you guys.
About a mile from Big Muddy River, a place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away.